Morning everyone, it's good to be with you. We've just last week finished our series on mental health based around the verse from Corinthians, which tells us that we have the mind of Christ. What an amazing thought. Hopefully the series has been helpful, and as part of that series I've been asked to share a testimony which a few of you will know, but which I hope that many others will find helpful. Many years ago, I suffered a mental breakdown while I was on an extended visit to India. I was admitted to a hospital in Delhi, and part of the treatment involved ECT. This involves an electrical stimulation of the brain while they put you under anesthesia. I spent many days in hospital and was finally able to leave when my parents arrived from the UK to take care of me. On our return to England, I was again admitted to hospital, the RSH hospital, which is here in Southampton, and assigned to the Department of Psychiatry. The treatment, as well as drugs, again involved ECT. Some of you out there I can hear are saying that explains a lot, Kuldip. Seriously, during this period, I can remember one evening thinking, I'm 19, I have no control, my life is over. Not long after, one evening I decided it wasn't worth continuing this way, and I just wanted to end it. I put on my jacket and quietly walked out of the house into the rain. I knew a way to get onto the train track, which ran not too far from our home. I walked along it for a long way, hoping, and at the same time not hoping, that a train would come. Thankfully, no train came that night, because as I later realised, the trains didn't run that late in the evening, and I returned home. This whole period lasted many months, and it took the best part of a year for me to recover. These being the basic facts of what happened, I want to just couch the story in what the Lord was doing in my life at the time. Some months before I left for the trip to India, I finished college and didn't really know what to do with my life, so I decided to spend regular time seeking the Lord. One evening during this protracted period, I went to a meeting and a prophetic message was given, which I felt was for me. The message was based on the time when Jesus asked his disciple to sail across the Lake of Galilee, and a storm arose while he stepped comfortably in the back of the boat. In summary, the word for me was that my life was going to go through a storm, and there'd be no peace until Jesus says peace. I was excited, I was apprehensive, I was confused. It wasn't long before the winds of the storm, as it were, began to stir. You know, with every good Indian story, there involves a boy and a girl, and this is no exception. My dad, who at the time barely spoke to me because of my faith in Jesus, called me into his room and handed me a ticket to India. He'd found out I was seeing a young lady friend, Vashi, and decided he would get me married off to someone in India. I took the ticket and went to my room and wept before the Lord, basically asking why. I was seeking you, I said to God, and why is this happening? As I cried, a peace flooded my heart. The Lord started to show me that he would be with me, that he would use me to be a witness to my family out in India. The verse the Lord quickened to my heart and was overarching during this whole period was Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In brief, over the months in India, the Lord gave me opportunity to share the gospel with many in my village in Punjab and my extended family who lived in various villages not too far from where I was staying. I had the joy and the privilege of seeing my grandmother and two of my cousins put their faith in the Lord Jesus. that visit to India was to be the last time I'd see my grandmother. During this period, my dad wrote regularly to my grandmother asking her to find a suitable girl for me. And we went to see a number. No harm in looking, I thought. I had a deep and growing conviction that the Lord would work it all out. At that time, I became more and more absorbed in the opportunities that the Lord was giving me to share the gospel with anyone and everyone, and especially my extended family. To a degree, looking back, I was somewhat cut off, as it were, from reality. About 3 months into my time there, an uncle came to our village and said my dad had written to him asking him and I to go to Delhi to get work started on a plot of land my dad had bought to build a house for us. This news was startling and very unwelcome, but I felt I had no choice. My uncle said he'd get me started and he'd leave me to carry on with the work. Can you imagine Indian builders in the capital of India? Oh boy. My aim was to start the work and be kind to the builders as much as I could and keep them on side. But it soon became obvious that I was easy picking. Put simply, I was naive, and from what I understand, they were slowly and steadily ripping me off, taking materials, charging me more, etc., etc. As I became aware, I started to lose sleep. I didn't have anyone to talk to or guide me. After a while, I basically didn't sleep, and the nights seemed to while away as I lay there with my eyes open, thinking how I could best cope with the day that lay ahead. Thankfully, the Lord was gracious. My uncle returned a day before the breakdown. Some years later, he told me what happened that night shook him, and he described what happened with these words. He said, after a busy day on site of the building, we had to spend a night in a night shelter at a local Hindu temple because we'd missed the last bus home. As we tried to sleep, suddenly I got out of bed and started running uncontrollably towards a busy road as if I had a death wish. When my uncle tried to stop me, I hit him repeatedly, and with the help of several guys who were passing, he was able to stop me and get me into a taxi and get us to a hospital. I have little recollection of what happened to me over the coming period of time until my parents arrived from England and discharged me from hospital. We stayed with some friends of my parents in Delhi, and I have odd glimpses of memory during these weeks. I do remember blacking out without warning from time to time. During this period, my dad tried, unsuccessfully thankfully, to marry me off. Before we returned to England, my dad sat me down and said he would take me back with them if I promised not to go to church and not to see Vashi, and that I'd marry someone they'd choose in due course. I totally agreed. I was convinced I was no good for God or church, and certainly no good for Vashi. Shortly after arrival, I was admitted to DOP of the local hospital. I stuck to my promises for some time. After some weeks in hospital, I was allowed to go home for the weekends. A verse that was very precious during this period was Isaiah 42 verse 3. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. A conviction started to grow by now that I needed to go back to church. One Sunday, when my parents were dropping me back to the hospital, I plucked up enough courage and asked if they would drop me off at church. My dad immediately and outright refused, saying the hospital wouldn't be happy if I was late. I said, let me ask. I said to my mum, I'll get better if I go back. In God's mercy, my dad relented, and they took me to the church, which was only a few minutes from the hospital. in Northumberland Road, not far from here. That evening there was a visiting speaker who offered to pray for people. I also went forward for prayer. As they prayed for me, the word the Lord had given me many months ago, and which had gone out of my mind completely before concerning the storm, flashed back into my mind, and I felt the Lord say, "Peace." Very shortly after, I discharged myself from hospital. Although the Lord healed me that day, it took some time before I developed the level of confidence to begin to live a level of normal life, fearful that my healing wouldn't last. In many ways, this was a terrible period of time, and I would never choose for me or anyone else to go through it. However, it was a crucial time that the Lord allowed for His glory. It built a level of faith, a lived faith that nothing else could. I now see it as foundational time of learning to trust His will, His protection and His provision. I know full well that things don't work out this way for everyone. Neither do I wish to minimize what many suffer throughout their lives. To this day I see one man who was with me in hospital at the time still walking the streets, not looking in great shape. By God's grace, I've never had a repeat episode. I've shared this as an encouragement that the Lord is totally faithful and can use the worst times in our lives, both for our good and for His glory. Thank you for listening, and God bless.